Welcome back to the IDP Plus Advice Show, our third show of the off season. We're going to be talking about post free agency impact for IDPs. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. I am thrilled to be back with you all once again for another IDP Advice Show. I am your host, Ricky Rodrigue. You can find me on X/Twitter at RickyRod66. As I've mentioned in the past couple of shows, I love the NFL season. I love the NFL draft, but I'm also like a kid at Christmas time when it comes to free agency. I love myself some free agency as well. So in our previous two episodes here, as we've kicked off here in the off season, we've talked about winners and losers. The first episode was around defensive linemen, both defensive tackles / interior defensive linemen, as well as defensive end / edge / outside linebackers. That was our first episode. Then our second episode was on linebackers, where we talked about winners and losers for them as well. If you missed those last couple of IDP advice shows, you can go on back to this IDP Plus channel on YouTube and watch them, or you can also listen to them on Spotify. So definitely worth catching up. I've got a lot of direct comments offline, particularly they like the linebacker one in particular. I guess I was a little bit rusty on the first one coming back on the defensive line, but not that it was bad, but we're working our way back in. Okay. But this show now, speaking of show number 3, we're going to focus on the defensive back position. We're going to talk about cornerbacks and we're going to talk about safeties. We're going to do those combined. We're going to do that from a winners and losers perspective. One of the reasons why I really like to focus on these winners and losers, now I know it's still the NFL drafts to come, but post free agency, is that the repeat rates at positions in terms of the repeat of the top 12 and the repeat of top 24 are much lower than you would expect. And we'll talk about those numbers here in a little bit for defensive backs. And so as a result of that, looking at these changes in winners and losers really gives us a jump on what's going to happen in the 2025 season. I like to quote the great Bob Harris, the football diehard, where he says, we're not trying to draft last year's best team, we're trying to draft this year's best team. And knowing that there's lower repeat rates and knowing what's happening in free agency changes and winners and losers and so forth gives us an opportunity to start building and thinking forward for that 2025 outlook. Okay. Not to mention in Dynasty as well, not just redraft, but in Dynasty, then you start seeing opportunities of where we should maybe have some trade targets and so forth. So defensive backs is the plan today. Some examples of why this is important. New defensive coordinators. Gus Bradley, no longer in Indianapolis. He played a lot of single high safety. And now there's a new defensive coordinator there, the defensive coordinator from Cincinnati, Lou A. And we'll talk about the impacts of what that could mean for Nick Cross, who was very productive and very successful for a lot of IDP teams last year, but maybe not so much this coming year. So we'll talk about that. Also in free agency, when you have a lot of new players being added to a team, so if you're counting on maybe Darius Robinson just starting to break out from a dynasty perspective on the Arizona Cardinals defensive line, well, let's talk about that. Justin Jones and Bilo Nichols are coming back from injured reserve. They signed Dalvin Tomlinson, and earlier today, I'm recording this on April 1st, Tuesday night, they also signed Calais Campbell today. Plus, they have LJ Collier and Dante Stills coming back. So with all that, that means limited opportunity for Darius Robinson, but once again, a great example of why looking at what's happening in free agency and looking at impacts and winners and losers for different players at different positions has a huge impact in terms of what's going to happen this coming year. Now, As we go through this, I'll be talking about this from a standpoint of a combination of both redraft as well as dynasty. You'll be able to pick that up in my commentary. And I know scoring systems are different. I've talked about that each week. What I've tried to do is, when I was thinking about this, thinking about some tackle heavy scoring as well as big play scoring. So I kind of had those both factored in mind when I was ranking these folks from the winners and losers perspective. And yes, I do know that things can change as free agency continues, particularly probably most likely after the draft, after teams have completed their draft, started filling their rosters, seen the gaps they still have after the NFL draft, and trying to fill them with free agencies. And yet, free agents, excuse me. And yes, the NFL draft itself, that will cause impacts to this. But once again, this gives us a great start in trying to get ahead in looking at the best team for 2025. And depending on how you feel, once again, from a dynasty perspective, which if you like some of the thoughts and concepts and you're thinking, I don't know if they're going to make any other changes in the NFL draft or any other free agents would make a difference, maybe you're going to target some of these players early before some of your league mates catch on to some of this stuff. Maybe they're not paying attention as much and creates a better trade opportunity for you. So last thing before we jump into defensive backs, I've got to mention that IDP Plus has a tremendous sale going on. I'd call it a massive sale. I don't know if you ever see a better sale from IDP Plus or many other sites for that matter. They are offering 50% off any of the IDP Plus subscriptions. Just use the promo code IDP2025. That's IDP 2025, and that'll give you access to great articles on both fantasy as well as props. It'll give you access to all the rankings, dynasty, redraft, by position, rookies, you name it kind of thing. All of those rankings are there. From a tools perspective, they have fantastic tools that not enough people took advantage of this past year. And I think it's a huge opportunity to help you set your lineups on a week to week basis, such as team fantasy points allowed by position. Our weekly fantasy finishes by position for each player, both offensive players and individual defensive players. Lots of tools, and of course, Discord, and of course, the YouTube channel. So come join the IDP Plus family. Take advantage of that 50% off. Now, with that, let's go ahead and move into the defensive backs. And I told you I'd come back to this, so I just want to hit it now. Cornerbacks, on average, when you think about top 12 repeat rates year over year, it's less than 3 of the top 12 repeat year over year from a cornerback perspective. For the top 24, it's only 7.5 out of 12 repeat. So think about that. 16.5 of the top 24 cornerbacks do not repeat on average. Okay, that's for cornerbacks. Safeties is very similar. On the top 12, on average, less than 3 of the top 12 repeat year after year or year over year. From a top 24 perspective, it's a little bit better than cornerbacks, but only 9.5 of the top 24 repeat. So those are some staggering numbers to keep in mind and why these winners and losers are so darn important. So with that, let's jump into the winners. I've got 14 winners. One of them, the number 14, is actually tied to a winner and a loser, and I'll come back to that in a second. But let's start with number 14, Eric Murray. I have him as a winner and loser. I'll talk about him as a loser a little bit later. But the Jaguars signed him to be a starting safety, and he'll be paired with Darnell Savage as the two starting safeties in Jacksonville. Now, there was a statement that came out that he will be playing more of a free safety role, which could bode better for Darnell Savage, but at the same time, we'll see how much of that is free versus maybe too high versus maybe some alternating in the box between Eric Murray and Darnell Savage. Murray's 31, but they did sign him to a 3-year, $21 million contract, and he should get roughly 100% of the snaps. So from that regard alone, Eric Murray has some value, though I have him down the list at number 14 from a winner perspective. Okay, number 13, we're going to shift to a cornerback here, and that's Clark Phillips III with the Atlanta Falcons. D. Alford ended up holding down that slot cornerback position, which is so valuable, and that's because it leads to more tackles for cornerbacks. It leads to more sack opportunities, more tackle for loss opportunities. We love some slot when it comes to cornerbacks. D. Alford is an unrestricted free agent, still hasn't been signed by Atlanta or anyone for that matter. Clark Phillips, the draft choice from last year, is poised to step into that role. Now, that role is only valuable, and the same will apply to number 12, Tyke Smith of Tampa Bay. So let's talk about those two together. Tyke Smith, they didn't sign or draft any, they haven't signed anyone to give him any competition, and he played well when he wasn't hurt. But those two are going to be playing primarily slot. So when Atlanta and Tampa Bay plays teams that play a lot of three wide um, receivers, that gives them a chance to be on the field a lot more in the 85% range or so versus the 60 or 50% range with teams that maybe play more two tight ends or maybe go with two backs, a fullback and a running back, and so forth. So, but when they play those with three wide receivers, they're on the field. That's going to create great playing opportunities for those two. Clark Phillips, number 13, Tyke Smith, number 12. We're going to stick with the cornerback theme at number 11, and we're going to go with cornerback Kyler Gordon of the Chicago Bears. Now, Kyler does have injury issues from the standpoint he's never played more than 15 games in a season, and that was last year, if I remember correctly, was the first time he played 15 games. But when he's out there, he is ultra productive, particularly when he's being used in a significant amount of snaps on the field. Why do I have him called out here? His new defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears is Dennis Allen. If you go back and look at the Saints these past couple of years, Alontae Taylor played a lot of slot for a period of time. Fortunately, with the injuries that they had on the outside to Paulson Adebo, along with the trading of Marshawn Lattimore, he got moved to outside cornerback, which you saw a significant decline in his IDP stats. But who did increase? Ugo Amadi. I'm not sure. I always forget the pronunciation. Who moved to that slot role and was very productive. And on a points per game, Amadi finished as a top 12 cornerback. Okay. So what does that mean? Dennis Allen bringing that same defensive scheme from New Orleans to Chicago. Kyler Gordon is in a prime position for some of those cornerback blitzes that they use periodically, for some of that, and whether it be for sacks, whether it be for tackles for loss, being on the field quite a bit from a snap count perspective. Love me some Kyler Gordon going into this year. Okay. Let's shift to Carolina from winner perspective, and let's go with Demani Richardson. Their depth chart is as follows. They did sign Tre'von Moehrig, who was previously with the Raiders. But Xavier Woods left. He is signed with the Tennessee Titans. Jordan Fuller signed with the Atlanta Falcons. Nick Scott re-signed, but Nick Scott was basically playing behind Richardson and behind some of these other safeties and was more of a special teamer for the majority of the year. Sam Franklin is still a free agent, as just another side note from a safety perspective. Jamie Robinson did not really get much playing time and don't see much opportunity for him. If he couldn't leapfrog some of these other folks, I think Jamie Robinson, for some of the excitement when he was drafted a few years ago as a fifth rounder, I think we can kiss that goodbye. So with all that being said, I can see Richardson being paired with Moehrig. Now, I still think they are both going to have some opportunities to be back and forth and shuffled in the box. And actually, I think Moehrig will be less in the box, quite frankly. We'll talk about him and the Losers a little bit later. But at number 10 from a safety perspective, and if you looked at Richardson's stats, he was very productive when he played this past year in terms of IDP stats. So let's watch the NFL draft closely on this one. But as of now, Richardson, Demani Richardson, Carolina Panthers, number 10 on my winners list. Number 9, the Philadelphia Eagles. and it is further down, and I'll tell you why in a second, at number 9, but it's either Sidney Brown or Tristan McCullum, and right now I am leaning towards Sidney Brown. Now, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson III was traded to the Houston Texans. That created an opportunity in that secondary, which at this point in time, Sidney Brown, who coming back from that ACL injury and as the year progressed, looked really explosive on special teams, was all over the place. You could see the speed, you could see the chasing on the tackles, you could see him being productive in a starting safety role as well. Once again, with all these folks, and as I talked about earlier, we'll have to see what happens in the draft. Even though Tristan McCullum played ahead of him when there might have been an injury to Gardner Johnson or to Blankenship or where they're off the field, I think Brown, with his draft capital and now a full year removed from that ACL injury, jumps into that spot. I alluded to it when I kicked off the Philadelphia section here, but Vic Fangio is the defensive coordinator still. He likes to play a lot of too high safety, has him a lot of playing deep. It's part of the reason that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson III, his stats weren't as good this year in Philadelphia as they were during his first season in Philadelphia a few years back, or his first tour with Philadelphia, I should say. And it's because of the scheme and how they're used. But that's why I have him down at number 9 and not up much higher. But Sidney Brown is someone who I think will get 95% of the snaps and is potentially a viable top 24, top 30 safety this coming year. Let's go to Kansas City with number 8. Justin Reid left in free agency. Now, the Chiefs did do a lot of rotating, and if you watched my IDP advice shows during the year, and I talked quite a bit about Kansas City's safety rotation and the snap counts and them not being at, close to 100% in many cases. Every once in a while, you saw Justin Reid in the 90s, but not all the time. And what's going to happen now? They have one less safety. Will they add someone to the safety room eventually? Not so sure. Chamari Connor ended up playing quite a bit of the slot role, and Justin Reid played sometimes occasionally in the slot as well. So I could see Connor having to play more snaps in the slot. With that happening, I see Jaden Hicks and Brian Cook getting more full-time roles. And in particular, I really, really like Jaden Hicks. I am not 100% convinced that the Chiefs are huge fans of Brian Cook based on his utilization and how they usually had him in the 75-80% range, give or take on snap count perspective. He tended to be on the lower side compared to how they were using Reid and Connor and so forth. So more bullish on Jaden Hicks, the second-year rookie, and he is someone that I have as number 8 as a winner for the defensive backs. Number 7, Talanoa Hufanga with the Denver Broncos. Now that's if he can stay healthy, and that has been a big if the past couple of years. I can see him being very interchangeable with Brandon Jones, who I expect him to be starting next to in that Denver Broncos safety tandem. And I think it has an impact to Brandon Jones, which we'll talk about in the loser section here in a little bit. But I do see Hufanga returning from these past couple of years of injury, hopefully staying a little bit more healthy, being productive. Again, he's not all the way into my top 3, 4 or so, but someone that I think can be a top 24 safety here this coming year. So Hufanga, number 7, winner defensive back. At number 6, and I possibly should have him higher, Justin Reid, who we were just talking about from the Kansas City Chiefs, now with the the New Orleans Saints. My apologies to and I'm a Saints fan. How can I mess that up? But Justin Reid, as I talked about, got used in multiple areas with the Kansas City Chiefs. Deep safety, box safety, slot, occasionally on the outside, not too often, as outside corner. That was rare, and oftentimes when he was guarding someone man-to-man and they went motion. But Justin Reid gets used all over the place. His defensive coordinator with the New Orleans Saints now is going to be Brandon Staley. If you think back to how Brandon Staley used Derwin James, if Justin Reed gets used by Staley in the same manner that Derwin James was used, I'm not saying that Reed is as good as James, but it creates huge opportunities for him to be very productive from an IDP perspective. And so the more I think about it as I'm talking out loud, and I'm actually getting more excited the more I think about it, particularly even as a Saints fan, Justin Reed maybe should be even a little bit higher on this winners list. So Justin Reed, number 6 on my winners list for defensive back, but probably belongs a little bit higher on the list. Okay. I could see top 12. Let me just mention that for Justin Reed if he gets used by Brandon Staley the same way he used Derwin James. Number 5 on the list, Jeremy Chinn, because of his landing spot. I do like the fact that he landed in Las Vegas with the same defensive coordinator they had there of Patrick Graham, who tended to use Moehrig a little bit more in the box when Moehrig was healthy this past year. And of course, Moehrig is in Carolina, as I talked about a little bit earlier. So as a result of that, I think that plays to Chinn's strengths from a tackle perspective, not necessarily as strong from a coverage perspective, but they're asking him to do less of that, playing to his strengths in the box, maybe in the slot slash box. That could work out really well for him and allow him to retain the type of value he started regenerating last year after a great rookie year in Carolina, then some, let's just call it challenging years in Carolina, and then a really nice bounce back season in Washington, particularly in the middle of the season there where he was uber productive. Okay, so Jeremy Chinn, number 5 with the Raiders. Number 4, Cincinnati Bengals. Now they do have a new defensive coordinator in Al Golden coming in from college and from Notre Dame, so it'll be really interesting to see and watch in the offseason how he's going to deploy his secondary, particularly his safeties. But for now, I have Jordan Battle as winner number 4 in this list because no more platooning with Von Bell. Thought very highly of Jordan Battle coming out of college, out of Alabama, which pains me to say as a LSU guy as a side note. But all right, I'll give credit where credit's due. And so I think that they were easing him in, rotating him with Von Bell, and eventually near the end of the year, Battle was actually taking over, and Von Bell was not. There's a reason Von Bell hasn't been signed yet. Granted, part of it is the safety free agent market. Part of it is Von Bell aging and not being the same player he was earlier in his career. So with that, Battle's on the field 95% of the snaps is what I expect, along with Geno Stone. And I do expect him to thus be very productive based on his capabilities. Jordan Battle, number 4, winner, Cincinnati Bengals. At number 3, not the most uber talented person in the world, but sometimes it's just opportunity, and opportunity knocks and scheme knocks, and that is for Will Harris, the former free agent for the former Detroit Lion, former New Orleans Saint, who became a free agent here in the offseason. The Washington Commanders signed Harris to take on that Jeremy Chinn slot. As we know, Jeremy Chinn was uber effective, came back once again, as I was just saying, from from some horrible years in Carolina, later on in those last few years when he was there compared to early on. Will Harris in this scheme with this role can be very productive because he's not a stud athlete and he's kind of a little bit more of a journeyman, for lack of a better term. I see him probably ended up more in the top 24 than the top 12, but still a safety you can target. Will Harris, number 3 on the winners list. Number 2, I really, really like this guy. If he could only stay healthy, but I'm going to bet he is. And that is Ifeatu Melifonwu, the former Detroit Lion who is now a Miami Dolphin. The Miami Dolphins have let Jordan Poyer go in free agency, or didn't re-sign him. He had a 1-year deal, and he's still sitting down there in free agency. Of course, Jevon Holland signed with the Giants. So the Dolphins have signed Melifonwu and Ashton Davis from the Jets. don't see Ashton Davis as a stud. They probably signed him more as a special teamer. I expect them to do more. But Melifonwu, when he was healthy, particularly late in that 2023 year, and they were using him as a movable chess piece. They were blitzing him. They had him in the box. Um, he was a former cornerback, now playing safety, which gave him the coverage capability out of the slot, which created some opportunities and some interceptions as well. He made several big plays. If he can stay healthy, I see a big opportunity for him in this Miami defense. I have him as number 2 on our winners list. And as I talked about a couple of times earlier during the show, that's as of now. The NFL draft, other free agents could change that, but I love Melifonwu, number 2 on my winners list. Number 1 on the list might be a surprise for several folks, but we're going to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This gentleman has a high tackle floor when he plays the right number of snaps, and that is DeShon Elliott. And I know some of y'all may be surprised by that, but if you go back and look at his game logs when he played, in that 90% range of snaps, how effective he was from a tackle perspective. He was very effective. So there was some rotation going on at different points with Damontae Kazee, who is now, he is gone. On top of that, I forgot the name of the other gentleman off the top of my head who retired as well. Maybe that'll pop back into my head. So you've got now Elliott in there and playing more of that box role because they were really keeping Minkah Fitzpatrick in that deep safety role, that single high kind of role, which impacted Fitzpatrick's stats this past year. And this is a similar situation where Nick Cross was so effective in Indianapolis and Julian Blackmon got hurt because he was playing more of that deep safety role. Okay. So all that being said, though, DeShon Elliott has a great opportunity now with no other competition. Now you can say, Ricky, didn't they sign Juan Thornhill? Yes, they did. But Juan Thornhill will play that third safety role, probably play back, giving DeShon Elliott the chance to play that sort of third linebacker, strong safety box role as well, which I think is even better for him. And I'm not worried about Thornhill leapfrogging Elliott from a starting perspective because Thornhill couldn't hold a starting role in Cleveland with the likes of Rodney McLeod and Ronnie Hickman. And there was one more who got some rotation there because of injuries. Was it D'Anthony Bell, maybe? Can't remember for sure. But anyway, if Thornhill couldn't start next to Grant Delpit in Cleveland with those other guys as competition, I'm not so worried about him leapfrogging DeShon Elliott. So DeShon Elliott finishes number 1 on my winners list. I know that's a surprise, but I really like what I'm seeing there. So that is my winners list for defensive backs. And now we're going to move to my losers list. Just as important. A lot of those winners have a chance to jump in the top 24, top 12, maybe even the top 5. These losers have a bigger opportunity to fall out of the top 12 or out of the top 24, or maybe not even jump into the top 12 or 24 as we might have been hoping. And we'll hit on a couple of those folks as well. I have 18 of those. And let's start with number 18 from a loser's perspective in terms of what it means for IDP coming out of free agency. And the first number 18 is a bucket of folks. Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon, Chuck Clark, Jalen Mills, because all of those guys are unsigned free agents. So as of now, they are losers. And with the draft coming up and some of the other holes being filled, it's going to be similar to last year where a lot of these safeties that were free agents had a hard time finding roles and finding good roles, as free agency went on and as the season approached. So all those guys right now are losers at this point in time from a free agency perspective, from an IDP perspective. Number 17. I should call this New York Jet fans, because right now their starting safeties are Tony Adams and Andre Cisco. Cisco couldn't hold on to a starting job in Jacksonville, but yet the Jets gave, I'll call it decent money for him to come in, and it would appear he would be the starter. Am I convinced that Adams and Cisco will still be the starters come week 1? depending on what happens the rest of the preseason or free agency, preseason, et cetera. No, I'm not. But as of now, Jets fans are losers. Now, of these two, if they do end up being the starters, to my surprise, Tony Adams would be the one that I would bank on and not Andre Cisco. Adams did get some box work, particularly much earlier in the year, and then he ended up, his playing time started shrinking significantly. Um, if you think about Detroit's defense last year, they did play a decent amount of single high safety because they had, now granted, it was because they had Kirby Joseph to play that more free safety role, freeing Brian Branch up to do what he did. And if Tony Adams, he's no Brian Branch necessarily, but if he's in that kind of role and they use Cisco deep, then Adams could be productive. I just don't think it will. And for the Jets fans, they are losers number 16 because just don't like the safety tandem overall. Okay. Number 15, Cole Bishop. Really like Cole Bishop coming out of the draft last year. He was a second round pick. He got some playing time due to some of the injuries with Taylor Rapp last year, as well as DeMar Hamlin. And he did a pretty decent job for a rookie. I was hopeful that he would be starting next to Rapp this year, and that's still a potential possibility. However, they being Buffalo, did go ahead and re-sign DeMar Hamlin. With that re-signing, you would have to think the experience and the incumbent, he will be still starting next to Rapp, and that means Cole Bishop will not be. As the year progresses, do I think Bishop might be able to leapfrog one of those two? Do I think Bishop might outplay him to leapfrog him or step in there because of injury? Yes and yes. So Bishop is someone I would want to begin stashing as the year progressed onto my bench, particularly if it looks like he's not going to start early in the year. But maybe when you start getting to week 5 or week 6, something along those lines, Cole Bishop is now going to be sitting on my bench if I can work around waivers and bye weeks and so forth. So Cole Bishop, number 16 from the loser's perspective, because he doesn't have a starting job. Similarly, at number 15 and number 14, two gentlemen who won't have starting jobs. One is Dane Belton at number 15 with the New York Giants, PJ Locke at number 14 for the Denver Broncos. Dane Belton did okay when Tyler Nubin got hurt, and he played that Nubin role, and Nubin was playing more close to the box where Penix was playing a little bit more deeper. There was some rotation in there, but Nubin did get more of that box work. But when Holland left in free agency, you thought, oh, excuse me, when Pinnock left in free agency, you thought, oh, maybe there's an opportunity for Belton. But nope, they signed Jevon Holland. And we'll talk about Jevon Holland a little bit later, but it makes, with Nubin and Holland, makes Belton a loser right now. PJ Locke, similarly, despite starting all year last year, except when he was hurt, signing of Talanoa Hufanga to pair with Brandon Jones leaves PJ Locke without a starting job. So Locke, no starting job. Belton, no starting job. Bishop, no starting job. That's why they're 14, 15, and 16 from a loser perspective. Let's go to New England with number 13, and let's go with Marcus Epps. Epps was starting with the Raiders last year. Then he got injured fairly early in the year and ended up on injured reserve. And so now he is signed with the New England Patriots. But there's a couple of guys in front of him right now. That's Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers. I'm trying to say that fast 3 times. With those gentlemen ahead of him, Marcus Epps, who was a starter last year, now is on the bench. Now, New England did play some 3 safety stuff last year, but you got Mike Vrabel coming in, a whole new defensive coordinator, defensive staff coming in, replacing Gerard Mayo and his very junior defensive staff that Mayo had brought in. So Epps might get some 3rd safety stuff, but I don't see him jumping ahead of Duggar and Peppers. And on top of that, Marte Mapu, the 3rd-year player out of Sacramento State, the small school player, they drafted him to be a linebacker, maybe a little bit of a safety, maybe a hybrid linebacker and safety. When he was picked a few years back, everybody was excited to what Belichick was going to do with him. This past year, he played primarily safety, although they did move him up into the box some, but Duggar played more in the box than Mapu when Mapu was on the field. But I bring up Mapu simply because Epps might be number 4 behind Duggar and Peppers and Mapu. I do want to see, as a tangent for a second here, I do want to see what the Patriots do with Mapu. He's someone I want to watch, particularly if they end up moving him back to linebacker. And does that mean he could be the number 2 linebacker and maybe even stay on the field because he does have that safety hybridness as a 3-down linebacker, which could be great for him as well. So something to keep an eye on. I didn't have Mapu on my winners for linebackers, but someone I'll be watching. Okay, so back to defensive backs. Epps, number 13 from a loser perspective. Number 12, Jacksonville fans, because their safeties are Darnell Savage and Eric Murray. I told you I'd talk about Eric Murray as a winner and a loser. He is going to get a lot of snaps, but he's just a guy, folks. And Darnell Savage is too. 2 years in a row in free agency, Jacksonville has overpaid for safeties that just aren't that spectacular. And then on top of that, if you were keeping and holding out hope for Antonio Johnson, I think you can stop on that based on this most recent move to pay Eric Murray, who's 31 years old, 3 years and $21 million. So give up on Antonio Johnson. Feel bad for the Jacksonville fans. Savage and Murray will be on the field. Murray may get you some counting stats, but not someone I'm counting on big time this year. The Jacksonville fans and their safeties are number 12 on my loser list for IDP defensive backs. Number 11 is Green Bay TBD. And here's what I mean by that. And it's something we're going to have to watch. While there's been rumors about Jair Alexander being traded or released, at this point, he's still a member of the Green Bay Packers. So is Keyshawn Johnson. So they signed Nate Hobbs in free agency. We'll come back and talk about him in a second. Xavier McKinney returns. Javon Bullard returns his second year. Evan Williams his second year. Carrington Valentine returns as well. Not to mention the potential that they're rumored to be interested in drafting a cornerback in one of the early rounds of the NFL draft coming up. That's a lot of defensive backs for, let's just roughly call it 5 slots. And even if they trade away Jair Alexander, that's still 6 for 5 slots. Does that end up in a rotation? Does someone get bumped out of this? Here's my concern, okay, with these Green Bay Packer defensive backs, particularly when we start talking about the slot cornerbacks. Keyshawn Nixon, when he plays in the slot, very effective from an IDP perspective. Very, very effective, in fact. Not to mention he gets you return yardage as well if you have return yardage leagues as well, which gets added on top of that, which is fantastic. But when there are some injuries to the outside corners, they moved Nixon to the outside. When Nixon was on the outside, Bullard played more of that. He was a safety, but they played him more in that slot role. So, okay, let's say that happens. But however, they signed Nate Hobbs from the Raiders. Where was Nate Hobbs most effective? Was it on the outside or was it on the inside? It was absolutely inside from a cornerback position. And when Hobbs was healthy a couple years back, not necessarily last year, and played that slot role extensively, he was very productive from an IDP perspective. So I use the term TBD because there's a lot of possibilities that could happen. At safety, you could have McKinney and Bullard or McKinney and Williams, depending on what they do with the cornerback role. Lots of unknowns right now, even though we're in post-free agency. So Green Bay TBD, somebody's going to be a loser out of this mix. We're going to pay careful attention as to who it might be as the offseason progresses. But those are some of the quandaries we'll be watching out for. In San Francisco, Jair Brown. When Hufanga did come back, it was Jair Brown, not Malik Mustafa, who was impacted and sent to the bench. I actually thought when Hufanga was coming back that it was Mustafa was going to be impacted, and I was wrong. I admit when I was wrong, but I was. And now Hufanga's gone. So you think, okay, well, maybe it's going to be Mustafa and Jair Brown. But they went and signed, they being San Francisco, signed Jason Pinnock away from the Giants and Richie Grant from Atlanta. Now, Richie Grant was a backup, and they weren't, even though he's a former second round pick, they added Jesse Bates, they added Justin Simmons because they weren't happy with Grant, and Grant was a backup. But he could be competitive with Jair Brown. What I actually think is going to happen, though, is that Jason Pinnock is going to be starting with Malik Mustafa. And Mustafa actually played a little bit more deep role than I was expecting when he came out of Wake Forest. I thought he'd do a little bit more of the box role than he did. Some of these roles were flipped in reverse than what I was expecting. Um, so Pinnock could be someone who is a winner potentially, but I wasn't ready to put him there yet because there's still some ambiguity on who's going to start out of these guys. But as of now, I do think it is Pinnock. So I think Jair Brown is the loser of this bunch, and he is number 10 on my IDP loser list for defensive backs. At number 9, Aloy Gilman from the Los Angeles Chargers. Elijah Molden got quite the contract, and they acquired him in the trade. They must have been very happy with him. Y'all have Derwin James back there. Even if Derwin James plays this hybrid kind of role, probably means Gilman isn't getting the 80 to 90% snaps that we would hope for. I see Molden playing ahead of him. Of course, Molden does have an injury history, but right now your starters, I think, are Derwin James and Molden. Gilman is not. So Gilman is number 9 on my IDP loser list for defensive backs. At number 8, Trent McDuffie, cornerback, Kansas City. At this point in time, what have the Chiefs done from a secondary perspective? They signed Christian Fulton, who is a boundary cornerback. They have not signed anyone who could play and be successful in that inside slot role. Chamari Connor was used there. Justin Reed was used there. But as of now, because of this and because of McDuffie's capabilities on the outside as well as inside, and they use McDuffie a lot more outside than in 2023 when they used him a lot more in the slot, I was hopeful that maybe they signed someone in free agency, another boundary corner besides Fulton, allowing McDuffie to move into the inside. That hasn't happened as of yet. Maybe it changes in the draft. But as of now, I expect McDuffie on the outside, which means a return to form of what we saw for him in 2023 isn't as likely or probable. And based on what I think is going to happen in the safety role with Connor being in more in the slot, Cook and Hicks getting more playing time, McDuffie stays on the outside. Not great from an IDP perspective. So McDuffie, number 8 on my IDP losers list for defensive backs. Number 7, Mike Sanderstill. So similar to Trent McDuffie, it's not that I'm avoiding completely McDuffie, not avoiding Sanderstill. Just don't necessarily see that they're going to be potentially in the top 12. Sanderstill, for a rookie, was extremely productive, and he was used mostly on the outside last year. Just don't think that'll continue year over year in terms of that type of productivity on the outside, particularly when they know and have seen his capabilities as they challenged him throughout the year and had less and less success. So on top of that, Washington re-signed Noah Igbenogany, the former Auburn number 1 draft pick, who played in the slot while Sanders still was on the outside. In addition, they signed Jonathan Jones away from the Patriots, who is also expected to play more in the slot. So once again, I still think Sanderstill, McDuffie are going to be solid, not necessarily top 12 cornerbacks, but they do get a hit because they didn't get to move to the inside like I was really hoping for, at least not at this point in time. So I have McDuffie number 8, Sanderstill number 7 on my IDP losers list for defensive backs. Number 6, Tyler Nubin. So Tyler Nubin did, as I mentioned earlier, did get nice run. He did get a decent amount of snaps more in the box, which was great for his stats and his productivity until he got injured. But now they've signed Javon Holland, who's also extremely versatile and also is capable, as he showed a couple of years in Miami, about being very productive, not only deep, but closer to the line of scrimmage. Okay? What that means you can see some disguises that they're attempting to do where one might appear to be close and then they flip-flop very quickly at the snap or right before the snap, things along those lines. I don't see Newman get more of the lion's share closer to the box. I see more of Holland and Newman both getting some rotation there, which isn't great for the ceiling of either one of them. So I have both Newman and Holland as not being on our winners list, i.e., being on our losers list here at number 5, but particularly Tyler Newman, who, depending on who they were going to pair with him, I was hoping he was going to be much more in the box. That doesn't appear that's going to happen. He's number 5 on the loser list for IDP defensive backs. Number 4 is a cornerback, and so is number 3. At number 4, we have Jalen Jones for the Indianapolis Colts. So what did the Colts do? They signed Charvarius Ward. They have Kenny Moore back and healthy. Juju Brents is also supposed to be back and healthy, the second round draft pick from a couple years back. Now, why did Jalen Jones have a lot of IDP points? Because he was so bad, he was being thrown at a lot, picked on a lot. That created tackle opportunities, that created pass breakup opportunities, and some interception opportunities on some bad passes. If you look at some of the quarterbacks they played against, you can this past year, you can see why he had some success from that regard. He's one of the perfect cornerbacks, outside cornerbacks that we want, in that he was good enough to start, but so bad that teams wanted to pick on him and stay away from the other corners. And that's what happened with Jalen Jones. I don't see him being on the field as much unless there's some injuries, with the signing of Ward, with Brent's coming back from injury, with the All-Pro, previous All-Pro Kenny Moore in there as well. So Jalen Jones probably, for the loftiness of what he had, once again, depending on scoring systems and all, as for a cornerback for teams last year, big pullback on his scoring this year. He is number 4 in the loser list for DBs. Excuse me, number 5. Number 4 is Alontae Taylor from the Saints, who got off to a spectacular start playing in that slot, as I talked about earlier when I was talking about Dennis Allen and new Kyler Cardinal and so forth. But when he got moved to the outside, Ugo Amadi got moved to the inside, and that was bad news for Alontae Taylor. At this point in time, they signed Isaac Yiadom, or re-signed him. He was with them a couple years ago, played with San Francisco last year, but he was more of a number 4 cornerback, so I don't see him starting necessarily. So at this point in time, for the Saints to see Taylor and McKinstry on the outside, Amadi in the slot, which means Taylor, who actually got picked on quite a bit, similar story to the Jalen Jones, even when he's on the outside, which helped with his stats some, but with that, not playing that slot role, wasn't nearly as successful from an IDP stats perspective once he moved outside. So Alontae Taylor, number 4 on my losers list at this point in time, unless the Saints do something at outside cornerback and move him back into the slot. Number 3, Brandon Jones, safety for Denver. With the signing of Hufanga and Hufanga being paired next to him from a starting perspective, I think the two of those guys can do a lot of things interchangeably. And where Locke was not nearly as close to the line as much as he was in 2023, and with the pass rush being so much more effective, they didn't need to blitz PJ Locke and bring him close to the line and help, with run support, with blitzing and getting stats closer to the line of scrimmage. Brandon Jones and Hufanga, see them rotating some of that box opportunity because of the similarities of what they do, and once again not needing to blitz them as much because of Denver's accomplishments with the defensive linemen that they do have, with the Benitos of the world, with the Jonathan Coopers of the world, with the Zach Allens of the world, etc. I just don't think Brandon Jones will score nearly as much as he did last year because of that utilization. So Brandon Jones with the Hufanga signing becomes number 3 on my loser list. Number 2, Tre'von Moehrig. Sorry, I know I've probably butchered his name throughout this broadcast, and I apologize. But moving to Carolina, I think he'll be a lot less in the box than he was in Las Vegas when he did play. And Carolina will have an improved front 7, several signings on the defensive line as well. adding an additional linebacker to go next to Josie Jewell as well. With all that happening, less need for Moehrig closer to the box as well. Same defensive coordinator. Just think it's going to be bad news for Moehrig. So Moehrig number 2 on my IDP loser list for defensive backs. Number 1, and I alluded to it very early before I even started talking about individual defensive backs when I was talking about major scheme changes. Gus Bradley is out in Indianapolis as a defensive coordinator. The Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, Lou A, because I can't pronounce his last name very well, is in. And if you look at how Cincinnati tended to deploy their safeties, it wasn't a single high safety situation. So with that happening, Nick Scott, not nearly as close to the line of scrimmage as much, creating less tackle opportunities. As a result of that, see a big drop in Nick Cross's scoring for the Colts from an IDP perspective. Not to mention they added Cam Bynum, who probably takes a step back as well as a side note as he comes over from Minnesota. But in particular, Nick Cross, who was one of the top leaders in combined tackles for the safety position, see a massive drop off for him with the change in defensive coordinator and the add of Cam Bynum. So Nick Cross, number 1 on the IDP defensive back losers list. Okay, that covers our winners and losers for defensive backs post free agency so far, with more to come. But I hope that gives you some insight and some thoughts for looking at your dynasty rosters right now, for looking for redraft in terms of potential people you might want to target. Also for dynasty, not only your current rosters, potential trade targets as well. So I hope this helps you out with some of that thinking. So that wraps up our winners and losers for the defensive line, for linebackers and defensive backs for over the last 3 shows. Once again, you can go back and listen to the first 2 on the IDP Plus YouTube channel as well as on Spotify. Coming up next, we're going to do a mock draft with yours truly, a one-man mock draft most likely. I may bring on a guest, but as of now, it's a one-man mock draft. And I'm leaning toward just doing an IDP one, and then maybe we'll do an IDP and offensive one after that. So it'll be really interesting to get y'all feedback on the IDP rookie draft. And I know scoring systems are different, so there'll be a lot of probably questions and concerns about how that ends up. But we'll do that, and we'll discuss some of those rookies and some of the thoughts there. Okay, that'll be our next show. If you have questions, put them into the YouTube comments, and I will try and answer them there, as well as bring them onto the show and answer them here as well. Okay? If you enjoyed this show, if you like what I'm doing, please give me a thumbs up on this on the YouTube broadcast here, and also give me a follow at RickyRod66. Don't forget that 50% off subscription at IDP Plus with the promo code IDP 2025, IDP 2025. 50% off any of the subscriptions, articles, rankings, tools. And by the way, if you do subscribe, go ahead and put that in the comments as well. Let me know, even if you did it after one of the other previous shows. Let me know if that's the case. So with that, we'll see you in about another week or so. This is Ricky Roderick wishing you, your family, your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another. And I'm out of here. We will catch you next time.
Watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.